Oh, good evening, everybody. It's just after 6:30, so we will start. Welcome. Let me just go through the housekeeping. We're not intending to have a fire drill, so if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. And the fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Unless you have a disability, in which case you should go to the lobby there and wait for the fire service or rescue to come and get you. And I will be there, and Keith will be there to welcome you. The meeting is being webcast live on the internet, so please make a note of that. Mobile phones, can you switch them off or at least turn them to silent? I think that's all for the moment. Apologies for absence and substitutions. None? Brilliant. Declaration of interest. Oh my goodness, Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to declare that my works for Chase de Vere in Basingview.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. On the Basingview update, my employer works on Basingview. I don't know whether they're going to be mentioned in the presentation or not, but I'll do it just in case they are, just to be covered.
Thank you, thank you. I suspect that neither of those things will prevent you being part of this discussion. So, have you checked that with Mel or somebody? No. Okay, well, let's hope we don't have to. So, I don't believe there are any urgent matters. So, can we move to item 4, the minutes of the committee meeting on the 16th of June? Are we all happy with that? Good. Has anybody got any matters arising that they want to raise? Briefly? No? This is going really well. Item 5, Basingview update. We've invited Councillor John Isaac to come and talk to us about Basingview. The principal reason, I think it's true to say, is that it's a major project, and we'd heard rumours that it was potentially overspent, and also that it was running late, and that clearly will impact the desire of certainly Waitrose and John Lewis to open before Christmas. For those of you who don't know, the reason that shops get everything ready in October is that there are only 2 paydays to Christmas. That's why it happens so early. And I would imagine both Waitrose and John Lewis would want to do the same. So that was the basic question. I have had a side meeting with Councillor Isaac and gone through as many questions as I think I could think of. And I had hoped, and it's my fault, that the information that you will have received today in the Basingview Executive Committee agenda we could have referred to, but it may be that because of that we might ask Councillor Isaac to return next time to pick any of those things up. There are things in there that including time frames, and there's some pink paper stuff in there, so it is very much worth a look at. And so we'll see how we go. Councillor Isaac, is it okay if I ask you to go ahead? You are well supported on your left and right, and all questions will be directed at you.
So I hear.
Yes. Thank you.
I'm allowed to refer to my supporters.
Yes. Yes. Yes, you may. Yeah. Okay. Just get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for inviting me to come along and give you an update on progress being made at Basingview. As Councillor Pearce has said, this is one of our key projects, and it's absolutely crucial to the future prosperity of Basingstoke and the borough. It's incredibly important in relation to the provision of new jobs, retaining employers, attracting new companies into our borough. I think councillors before us have recognised that having stood for over 40 years, Basingview had reached a point where new investment was required. And so in a sort of far-sighted way, councillors before us have decided that we needed to enter into a long-term partnership with an expert developer so that we could act as the catalyst to regenerate Basing View. Just to pick up on your point, I don't think there's any connection between any possibility of sort of lack of progress in relation to Basing View as a whole, perhaps in relation to some of the roadworks, but I think that if there are any issues around the opening of John Lewis and Waitrose, it's to do with works that they're doing themselves as part of their construction. I think that's right, is it? Yes. Yeah. Right. Okay.
I'm sorry, Councillor Isaac. I just realised that Councillor Harvey wished to address the meeting. Can I just establish whether he wants to do that now? Okay. Carry on.
Okay. Yeah, fine. So, I've asked Kate Dean, who's responsible for the project, to give an update, a PowerPoint update on what we've achieved over the last 12 months, and also to tell you what we have planned for the next 12 months and beyond. Just some highlights. I think people who go past Basing View will see there's noticeable progress going on there. The frame is up for the John Lewis and Waitrose stores, and I'm not sure whether they'll be opening this side or the other side of Christmas, but their opening is imminent, and it's going to make a big difference to the retail offer in the town, and will also help generate the activity and the investment that we're looking for generally at Basing View. This year, the last 12 months, in addition to taking forward the construction of the John Lewis Partnership and Waitrose store, which has been undertaken by our development partners, Muse. We've also moved forward with our branding of Basing View, our new and also our marketing campaign. Kate will tell us more about that. We've also taken major steps forward, and I think you'll see this, in improving the landscaping and the public realm all around Basing View. I think it looks noticeably better now. And we've also gone a long way to putting together an estate management strategy, which Kate will explain more about, but essentially it is to enable us to look to all the other occupiers on the estate to contribute towards the upkeep of the roads and the landscaping, the rest of it, which wasn't in place until now. We're also made great strides in relation to the master planning of the development. Bear in mind that this is evolving as a master plan as we go forward. We need to adapt to the market conditions that we face, look at new opportunities. So I think whereas we may have started with the view that it was going to be very much an office scheme that we were replicating, we're looking at other uses on the park, including residential uses. We're also looking at the bringing in a good quality hotel onto the estate, because we feel that that will make the offer much more attractive overall if you've got these other supporting facilities there, and will make it more of a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week community rather than one that empties after everyone goes home at the end of the working day. Other things that we've established over the course of the last 12 months is a Basingstoke Occupiers Forum, and that seems to be working well. We're getting good attendance at that, and I would encourage you to go along to those meetings. I think, when's the next one?
24th of September.
Right. Good. Just a few comments about what we've, particularly for the new councillors, what actually has been put in place at Basingview. What we've got there, because it's a long-term regeneration project, it was decided back in, I think, 2010 that we needed to bring alongside us a long-term partner with the expertise, the resources, to take forward the regeneration of Basingview over a long period of time. And that's why we are where we are now with a partnership with Muse Developments, who are one of the leading players in that marketplace. They work with a lot of borough councils and city councils across the country, so they're something of a specialist when it comes to sort of urban regeneration. So that partnership was entered into in 2012, or the back end of 2011. I can't remember, was it? Yeah, 2011. And you need to understand, it would be helpful to understand, I think, that the basis of that partnership is that we work together to identify opportunities for the building out of the 5 vacant sites that we started with. I think there are more now, but there are 5 vacant sites on Basingview, and their job is to identify occupiers for those sites and to bring them forward, and to do all the master planning, the transport studies, and the rest of it, to make this an attractive proposition to occupiers. So they've done that, and once we get to a position, as we did with John Lewis Partnership and Waitrose, where we've got a party that's interested in locating on Basingview, then their responsibility is to prepare the development programme, do the costings, and then undertake, if we as a council approve that scheme, and are happy with the viability of it and what it's going to produce as an outcome for us as residents. If we approve that, then at that point their job is to deliver that, and that's what they've done with John Lewis Partnership and Waitrose. But the crucial thing, and I just want to make the point, because I think the comments been made to me about, you know, are we at risk of another Mal's where the council is responsible for an overspend? We're not directly contracting in this case with the building contractor. Muse do that. They're the party that are at risk when it comes to delivering the contract. So if there's any cost overruns, that's down to them. Clearly, they're not doing it for the good of themselves. They are looking for. They're going to take a development profit out of this, and there is a development profit that is written into the development agreement. There are also in the development agreement things called KPIs, key performance indicators, and they are measured against those key performance indicators. But the point I think one does need to bear is that this is a long-term relationship, and so there may be points where they do not achieve KPIs in certain timescales, but it's a long-term relationship, and therefore we have to think very carefully about stepping in and removing their responsibilities, or ultimately seeking to break that. I'm not suggesting we're in any that's a thought that's crossing our mind in any way, because I think the relationship with them is good, and we've had a very good start with the delivery of John Lewis Partnership and Waitrose on Basingview. But it just gives you some idea of what the mechanisms of control are between the parties. I think just one final point here is that the intention has always been that this would be a market-led regeneration of Basingview. We are looking for the market occupiers who want to take pre-lets, or other investors who want to come in and build a hotel. We're looking for them to put up the money and take the risks. We're acting as catalysts generally. So we're not seeking, unless we can get funding from government or LEP, we're not generally seeking to use council capital to put that at risk in terms of speculative development of offices. I think as a council we've got other priorities, but you know, these things are always considered, because one of the challenges we've got at the moment is that Basingview does not have new office accommodation on it. It's not got high quality modern office accommodation, and that is a real issue, because almost to a company, occupiers will want to have modern air-conditioned offices. They're not prepared to make do with second-hand buildings that are tired and where the air conditioning systems are not functioning as they should do. So that's one of the bigger challenges we've got, is how do we provide new, what the market calls Grade A office accommodation on the park. That's enough from me, probably, and I would, if you, I don't know whether you want Paul to speak or whether you want Kate to do her presentation.
What a choice. Councillor Harvey, do you wish to exercise your
Democratic right.
yes or whatever? You want to do it now? Okay, thank you. Yeah, but it's okay with me. Is it okay with everybody else? Join us.
Thank you, Chair. Sitting on the map and being one of the, there's a few of us sat around the table, but ward members that have a ward directly related to Basingview, I wanted to come along and make a contribution this evening, following on from the Cabinet member. I think it's important just to start by saying that we welcome and support, I think, the ongoing work to regenerate and revitalise Basingview. It's a cross-party shared aspiration and ambition. And I think we recognise the importance of it to the local economy, as the Cabinet member has already set out and outlined. And I think we also recognise the crucial role the Council has to play in that. And I think the Cabinet member's words of saying we're a catalyst is probably a good choice of words, actually. It's this Council's ability to attract and shape and form that really is our ace in the hole that we play off with Muse, off with all of those potential partners who we might see come forward. I think there's a real need as well to balance the development of Basingview with the rest of the town centre, and I know that's something that the Labour group takes very seriously, and we are not the only ones. I think ever since we opened Festival Place, we've shared the vision of trying to include, I think, the top of town with Basingview, the malls, alongside, and this is the important point that goes with this, particularly with where Basingview may well be going in the future, the aspirations of everyone who live in the town centre. And there are a significant number of people who live in our town centre, and that's always an important point to consider. I think we also support the desire to see the retention of existing businesses and jobs, but also support the development and growth of both local businesses and encourage other multinationals to come and locate and come to Basingstoke, and that's again a shared ambition and aspiration that we have. I think we also recognise the importance of the hub that Basingview can be, and I'm thinking very much there in terms of, you know, not just the education element that's always been spoken about and the skills element, but also the entrepreneurial talent element that comes from many of the facilities and the opportunities that Basingview offers. I think one of the other key aspects for us is the decision, if it is taken, and it is set out in the local plan, to provide residential development on site. If so, if that's the direction of travel that's gone in, we want to explore models of affordable housing and secure housing and residential development that benefits the whole workforce and the whole community. That is something which complements the ambitions for Basingview and the town centre, but also the priorities and aspirations that we have for our town and borough. And I think there's a serious conversation to be had about that important aspect of any future for Basingview. And that's a conversation that we are willing to have. I think where it's right to work cross-party, we're going to support the administration, and we will look for a joined-up vision, and we will look for the priorities and the things that we hold dear. I'm sure you do too. And I think that's something that the business community can have confidence in, regardless of political control of the council, and it's something I know they're looking for and want. So I think in that sense the local economy is bigger than party politics, and it's something that we recognise, and I know it's something that the administration recognise. And we share that view and look to it in the way we might shape Basingview going forward over many, many years. This isn't just going to be something that happens in the next 5 or 10 years. This is going to be a project over the long term. And this is also the family silver for our council. These are some of the most important assets that this authority is involved with, and how they're managed and looked after is a concern to all of us. So yeah, I'm sat here speaking in support of what the Cabinet member has already shared, in support of where the map has gone in recent years, and look forward to working hopefully cross-party with other members to see this a success that we all want it to be. and there will be discussion, and I'm sure there'll be other differences of opinion, but hopefully we can overcome those in a positive way to achieve the sorts of things we all want to see on Basingview.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I think that's very positive. Have you anything else to say? No? Has anybody got any questions for Councillor Harvey? No? Thank you. Oh, welcome. So, Kate, over to you.
Okay. I'm just going to start with a quick recap of progress made to date, really, and also just to let you know that I've just been in this role since the beginning of January. So I've got a lot of history over the last 7 months, but prior to that, not so much. But essentially, just to recap what John has said, the scheme was successfully launched to the property industry in last October. It competes with a number of other large-scale business parks in the area, and they are namely Farnborough Business Park, which is just up the road, but particularly schemes as well in Reading, Green Park, which is an out-of-town business park that's seen a great deal of success recently. Reading Town Centre itself, where there is approximately 500,000 square feet of speculative Grade A office accommodation under construction at the moment as well. And there are also competing schemes in Bracknell, where the town has seen some speculative development over the last 4 or 5 years that hasn't let up, but that sits there as immediate competition to the sort of product that we're trying to deliver in the town. The council committed to undertake public realm improvements to improve the general amenity of the park. 2 phases of that have now been completed, and we've just got one very small amount of work to do in relation to the front of Matrix House. That's having to be done as a 3rd phase because of the implications of the planting season, but also the works that are required to complete the John Lewis store itself. In relation to the management of Basingview, one of its biggest challenges is because of the nature of the leasehold structures, we don't have the ability to recover any form of service charge. So most modern business parks, all of the tenants will pay a contribution to a service charge, which enables the delivery of centralised services such as security, landscaping, maintenance of common parts, and unfortunately we don't have the luxury of that at Basingview. So the view is, if we can establish it as a business improvement district and recover a levy through that, that we can start to fund some of the centralised services that one would expect to see on a modern business park. And in terms of progress with that, the aspiration was that we would twin track the bid for the town centre and Basingview. At the same time, I think the reality is that the town centre has moved ahead more quickly. But through the quarterly occupier forums, we've got a much better and improving level of traction with the business occupiers up there, who I think now understand how a bid can be successfully deployed in Basingview. So the aspiration is over the course of this year and probably the early part of next year that we will continue to move forward with those bid discussions with the occupiers. As Councillor Isaac has said, we've now instigated quarterly Basingview occupier forums, and we are engaging with really a cross-section of businesses up on Basingview. So that runs from the smaller occupiers, such as the guys in the retail parade, through to the big, large-scale corporates such as Talus and the AA. So that's good. An important part of the process up at Basingview is engagement with the head lessees, because clearly the council continue to own the freehold of the land, but we actually don't have control of any of the buildings up there above and beyond the Basingview shops. So we do have to engage with the head lessees, who are controlling all of the buildings essentially up on Basingview, and the challenges that are really associated with their lack of investment in the buildings that they hold on very long leases. Then finally, in terms of other positive achievements, the Network Rail campus is now complete. and they are moving towards a formal opening, we believe, later this month, early part of next month. Just to move on to the John Lewis store, as Councillor Eisder said, we're targeting an opening date of Christmas this year, but there have been delays with the programme of John Lewis, and they have been specifically associated with some rather large-scale infrastructure changes, and particularly the relocation of a large gas main. Southern Gas Networks have been quite difficult in terms of that piece of work, and that has delayed the programme, but that is now all resolved. The gas main has been relocated, and John Lewis is keen to achieve an opening of the store prior to Christmas for all of the reasons that Councillor Isaac has outlined. And to enable them to do that, they are now deploying a whole series of acceleration methods, and primarily that is around achieving 7-day working from now through until store opening. So that is with the council's planning team at the moment. Good news is, in terms of recruitment, they have appointed both of their store managers, and they have also launched their recruitment programme, and that creates 350 new jobs for the borough. They have got a small number of vacancies left to do on the recruitment, but the closing date for those is actually this Friday. So they are very well advanced in terms of what they're doing on that. Just in terms of hotel feasibility, we, through Muse, have appointed a leisure specialist, Christie & Co. They have gone to market in March, and they were focusing primarily on a site that we call the Midtown Plaza, which is effectively the former Scott House site, the Loddon Parade shops, and the site that sits behind that. So they were targeting mid-scale business hotels. So in terms of the brands that we're talking about, it's Hilton by Garden Inn, Marriott Courtyard, which focus very much on the quality of the bedroom offer and people being able to feed or get fed during sort of out of core hours. They won't have a wet leisure offer. There'll probably be a small gym, but the focus is very much about meeting the demands of businesses in the town centre, and specifically on Basingview. So they have to date received 10 expressions of interest, and discussions are ongoing with all of those hotel operators at the moment. And very recently, Christie's have gone back to market to check investor appetite to support the financing of those sort of hotel models. In terms of housing, we have identified the residue of the John Lewis site, Plot C, as potentially being suitable for the delivery of a PRS scheme. PRS stands for Private Rented Sector. It's very much an emerging asset class. So in terms of the sort of challenges around that, it's simply the fact that it's a relatively unproven asset class, but most of the large-scale UK property funds have got very comfortable with residential as a viable asset class, and are putting large weights of money aside to invest in it. We've taken market soundings from our advisors who've been CBRE, and there's an acknowledgement that there is good, strong local demand for that type of scheme. And so to date we have had 4 expressions of interest, and discussions are ongoing for that as a 182 unit scheme. In terms of office development, this clearly remains an office-led master plan, and Basingview is undoubtedly the town's central business district. The fact that it sits right next to the town's railway station and the town centre itself means it's very, very well positioned in terms of being a sustainable offer to the market. The marketing continues to be pre-let driven. And as Councillor Isaac has said, that's presenting some challenges for us, simply because the speed of which occupiers are moving at the moment and the historic challenges of delivering pre-let schemes. So what's happening at the moment essentially is that occupiers are looking at their business planning, seeing that they've got a need for property and wanting to commit to existing product rather than waiting for the delivery of pre-lets, which routinely take 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years to deliver. The focus at the moment is on delivering around the Midtown Plaza, because with the interest from the hotel operators, that makes sense to deliver the associated office development sites, and we can deliver a building of about 30,000 square feet and another one of 40,000 square feet. In terms of where demand's sitting at the moment, it's in that range or under 10,000 square feet. It's just simply not possible to negotiate pre-lets for anything under 10,000 square feet. You have to achieve a critical mass of 30 to 40,000 square feet before the appraisals become viable. So that's playing back to our challenges really in terms of not having any grade A supply at the moment, and therefore having to consider any routes to look at speculative developments, so we are able to react to requirements as and when they come up at short notice. Just in terms of next steps that we're looking at the moment, I mean, firstly, it's really about increasing the rate of development, and the development has done very well, and I don't think anybody should lose sight of the fact that we've just come through a really appalling recession, and commercial property was undoubtedly one of the first sectors to be hit, and to be hit early, and to be hit very badly. So the fact that we've been able to deliver the John Lewis scheme and the Network Rail scheme is incredibly positive. We believe that we can also press on this year and deliver the PRS scheme and hopefully the hotel. So effectively we will have delivered the downtown element of the business plan. We'll then be moving on to deliver Midtown. So in terms of rate of development, that is incredibly positive. But we also need to look at how we can generally increase the rate of development of the office element, and that's what we're looking at the moment, and potentially introducing complementary uses to that office element, because it's a bit of a rock and a hard place that office occupiers want amenity, and amenity providers want the office occupiers before they commit to the amenity elements. So we're looking at how we can twin track those and deliver at the same time, so that we generate much more of a vibrant community down at Basingview, and really stop it being a 9-to-5 community, which is essentially what it is at the moment. When the office occupiers go home, the area sort of closes down, and that's giving us some issues at the moment in terms of some antisocial behaviour, particularly focused on the Lobby Parade car park. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to add to that, John, before I throw it open for questions?
No, I think
Sorry, Councillor.
what we want to say.
Okay. So, questions? Jerry.
Yeah, excuse me. Could you say a few words on the parking issues and what's behind that interest, apart from the obvious? As you mentioned Reading, and I haven't been to Reading now in probably 10 years because the parking charges became so exorbitant. I tend to think they maybe shot themselves in the foot there. And we did see a rather peculiar thing this week. I think it's a bit of a one-off in Cardigan, where all the local authority machines were vandalised, and local businesses reported between 20 and 50% increase in business. I think probably in a one-off, as everyone availed themselves of free parking. But certainly in Newbury, John Lewis at home has had a massive impact on bringing people into the town. and other businesses have benefited. But again, I have no expertise in this matter. Parking is a sort of a sensitive issue where it either becomes a bit of a cash cow or shoots your foot off. So I wondered what consideration or modelling had been done regarding planning, parking availability and costs for this new development.
I'm going to give you my view first of all, and then I'll turn to Kate, who'll give you the official view. But I suppose, having worked in the property industry over many years, and particularly in the offices sector, I'm very aware of the importance of car parking for staff, and that this is one of our big aces in the hand, that we have got. You can get into the town by car, and you can park your car, and either there's parking that's available with the buildings, or there's parking that you can pay for, which is at a reasonable price. So I do, like you, sort of make the distinction between coming into Basingstoke and coming into Reading. But Kate will now explain that we do also have to move forward and encourage people to look at other modes of transport, and also look at ensuring that in future that Basingview is not clogged up with cars and the rest of it. So I will at that point hand over to Kate, if I may.
Sorry, and just to clarify, as part of securing planning permission for John Lewis, there was a large piece of work that was done on transport strategy that confirmed that the road network in and around Basingview and the town centre was capable of supporting that John Lewis development in that location. Obviously, it also comes with its own on-site car parking. It's within minutes walk of the railway station and the bus station. So there's an aspiration that people will deploy a whole range of sustainable methods to get to the store, and that everybody simply doesn't just jump in a car and drive. In terms of pricing, the car parking at Basingview comes as part of the leases on the buildings. Because of the age of the buildings, they all have a historically advantageous car parking ratio. So the buildings are essentially parked at a ratio of about 1 space to 300 square feet. If you look at new buildings that are being developed in Reading Town Centre in similar locations in terms of walking distance to the railway station, they're parked at a ratio of 1 space per 1,000 square feet. So the situation in Reading is radically different. I think if you play back to the sustainability piece, if Basingview and Basingstoke wants to be seen as a modern environment, and Basingview wants to position itself as a modern business park, I think we need to look at a sustainable transport strategy that just doesn't simply focus on getting everybody to drive to work. That's not good practice in terms of commercial property development anymore. But you know, we recognise that occupiers like to be able to drive to work. So it's striking some sort of balance. And the interesting thing that's happening at Basingview at the moment is we're generating income from temporary car parking spaces, and that means that effectively businesses are getting even more advantageous car parking ratios by taking temporary car parking spaces.
You're happy with that? Okay. Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to have your thoughts on Grosvenor House. Looking around or driving around the Basingview area, I noticed that Grosvenor House is pretty much sticking out like a sore thumb in the fact that it's 1950s, 1960s office development, and I'd just like to know what are the potential plans for that area, please.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. I'm aware of the background with Grosvenor House, and I know that Kate has had discussions, I think, in recent times with the long leaseholder there. So again, it's probably best if she gives you an answer on that one.
The building is owned by a company called the Exelarch Foundation, and they have also recently bought Southern Cross, which is the building next door that's occupied by Kia. I saw Daniel Dangoon about 2 months ago, and he is the son of the founding member of the Exelarch Foundation, and undoubtedly their aspiration, and probably the reason that they bought Southern Cross as well, was to look at redevelopment of both of those adjoining sites for residential. I've explained to him that under their leases, that the council has control over use, and the use for those buildings is specified as offices, and that's what we would like to continue to see those sites for. Clearly Grosvenor House itself is an ugly building, and it's in very poor condition, and it's also the source of, again, antisocial behaviour in the evening associated with graffiti and use of the car park. They have got a local managing agent who is London Clancy, who, to be fair, are reasonably quick in terms of reacting to those issues, but it's an ongoing problem. In terms of the location of the sites, we've looked at alternative uses, as Councillor Eist has suggested, and the view at the moment is, because of the prominence of those sites to the dual carriageway and Basingview being the central business district for the town, that it would be unhelpful if those sites went to residential. That's putting out a mixed message in terms of what we want that to be. So it's important that those sites remain and hopefully get redeveloped. I understand that there's also an ongoing dilapidations argument with the outgoing tenant, and it may be that the head lessee on Grosvenor is not doing anything at the moment because he's trying to secure a dilapidations payment from his last tenant.
You happy with that, Councillor Frost?
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cousins?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Kate and Councillor Isaac for their contributions tonight so far. I just want to take it back to the increased rate of development, and you said that there was a consideration for 7-day development at the moment. Have residents of Skyline Plaza been informed and consulted of this? My understanding is that there has been some night work on Basingview during the course of its progression, and they haven't always been told that the night work's going to happen.
Yes, that's right, and I understand that there was a situation about 6 weeks ago when Beaumer and Kirkland did do some overnight works that hadn't been notified to the occupiers of Skyline Plaza. They have been told that that is unacceptable. They have been told that to do any more out-of-hours work, which includes Saturdays, that they have to notify anybody who's likely to be affected. Any reports that are fed back to the environmental health officers are then forwarded back onto Beaumer and Kirkland and can potentially be used as a reason to stop them doing nighttime works and out-of-hours work, i.e. Saturdays and Sundays.
So just for clarification, the request for 7-day working and out-of-hours working has been made and will be dealt with what, by development control?
Yeah, so they have to make a planning application to get 7-day working. That application has been made. It is out of public consultation at the moment, and then once that public consultation period has expired, the planning team will determine that planning application.
I'm confused. I understand 7-day working, but that's not 24/7, is it? So
No.
it's different. So nighttime working is not approved.
No.
And an application been made for it? Okay.
No, they have they've asked for extension of the working day during weekdays, and then they've asked for, I think, 9 to 5:30 Saturdays and Sundays. The feedback from the environmental health team to date is that's not acceptable, and they've recommended 10 till 5 on Saturdays and Sundays.
Councillor Keating?
Thank you, Chair. I've had an interest in the developments in Beijing View for quite a number of years. I obviously welcome the arrangements that are being made in terms of updating, uprating the whole of the project. If the Beijing View is going to be a mixed economy in terms of housing versus office thing, I think there are a number of basics that you should understand. Houses that go beside railways are usually social houses. Not affordable housing or private rented housing, they're usual social housing. If you go along the Beijing View, go along the Basingstoke railway line, and you look at the housing next door to the railway line, it'll always be, inevitably, social housing. I think if you tried that in this particular case, you'd probably find it was not a good approach, because private rented won't want to be stuck on the side of a railway line. I do think that we as a borough have neglected our assets in terms of Beijing View for the last 40 years. We've just simply not done the job properly. We should have realised very quickly, once we were into the 90s, that offices need to be IT efficient, and they need to be such that people who want to work in modern offices will need modern buildings. Now, we had the buildings, but we never modernised them. So, it's all very well to have head leasees if you lose control of the building. So, I think one needs to have a balance between long leases and short leases, because otherwise you lose control of how the building is going to be updated or maintained. And it's essential, in my view, that we do that. The other point is, I've been speculating whilst you have been speaking about the potential for the borough to do some speculative uprating of one or two main offices to effectively pump prime the whole arrangement, so that you could say to potential occupants or potential redevelopers that we're actually investing in this bit as well. And I don't mean throwing 140 million or anything of that nature. I'm talking about doing a bit of speculative investment in getting one or two high profile and efficient office buildings readily available as soon as possible. Because we do need grade A buildings. We do need a hotel. But I suspect in the modern age, a hotel without a swimming pool won't be as attractive as it might be. Thank you.
Councillor Isaac, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Some wise words there. I'm not sure, though, I entirely agree with you about positioning of private rented alongside railway lines. I think that yeah, there's enough evidence. If you look at Woking, for instance, around Woking, there's high-rise developments there, and I think most of those are probably private rented. So I think the advice we've been getting from the experts is that site next to John Lewis and Waitrose is actually quite suitable for private rented housing. which is not to say it's not suitable for affordable, as I like to call it. Your point about us as a borough being slow to react to the ageing process that's gone on over the last 40 years at Basingview is absolutely spot on. But it's one of the things that's really not helped us is this lease structure, because while we've retained the freeholds and we get the ground rent, it's inhibited the long leaseholders from wanting to spend more money on and upgrading the buildings, because the constant theme one gets from them is, what's the point of me spending more money on this building if all it's going to do is jack up the rent that we pay you? And so we are saying to them, look, we'll come and talk to us, and we'll look at how we can restructure these leases so that penalty isn't applied. We're not going to give things away, obviously, but we want to make it easier for them to invest in upgrading the buildings. And the point you make about pump priming is absolutely well made, and we are looking at this because I think that one of the ways forward may be that it is a refurbishment of an existing building. That may be the step we take before we get to the shiny new Grade A building, and we are looking at opportunities with existing buildings on Basingview, and particularly where we've identified an occupier who may already be on the park, who wants to stay there but doesn't want to stay in the current tired premises that they're in, and may be willing to relocate somewhere else onto Basingview. And we are taking a leading role in this, because if we leave it to the market, it won't happen, and that's quite clear. And I'm very pleased that the officers here are really buzzing around the town, talking to all the occupiers, talking to the long leaseholders. They're doing a great job in that respect, and it's a tough one to pull off. But I think we're sort of closing in, I hope.
Okay, sure. Do you want to come back now? Councillor Cousins, please.
Chair, I'm aware that people have... I've already asked a question, other people haven't asked a question. I'm more than happy to come back in later to give other people a chance to speak. Fair enough. It was coming back to the increased rate of development. What my supplementary would have been was, if we don't increase the rate of development, when would the project be finished? And again, conversely, we want to increase the rate of development, so therefore what's the anticipated date of completion if an increased rate of development is agreed to?
It's how long is a piece of string, this one, I'm afraid. We want to maintain momentum. We've got momentum there, but there are constraints, and a lot of those constraints were pointed out by Kate, and we've got to be careful about our residents' money as well. We do want to, we're active players in this. We're not just waiting for things to happen, but we have got this problem here that the private sector investment market is not yet persuaded fully by what Basingstoke has to offer. I think it's coming, and in fact you've seen that with the acquisition of Churchill Plaza by outside investors, the Tosca Fund, which is a very good news because they're going to modernise Churchill Plaza. But it's not a given that these things are going to happen. So I can't give you an answer on that. It is a long-term project, but I think the thing is that there's a clear plan that we have here, and we have a good working relationship with Muse, and we're on their tails, I think is what I'd say.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watts.
I can't even pretend it is a question, actually, but why blame the IT people, Sean? In my experience, very long with IT and IT-related projects, major projects are always in giant porta cabins or otherwise cardboard buildings, whether it's on Ministry of Defence sites, banking premises, or whatever. It's the sales and marketing people who get the posh offices, and they're the people you've got to target, therefore.
Well, thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you.
I believe Mountbatten House is now listed. How will that fit into the big scheme of things? I've been to Mountbatten House several times myself. Is it the responsibility of Talus to maintain that to whatever standard that grading has identified? And how is that going to roll on into the future? Because grading a building limits its redevelopment to a degree. I'm just wondering how that fits into the big scheme of things.
I should declare that my stepson works for Tallis in the Paris headquarters.
I presume that's an invitation to have the next meeting in Paris, Councillor Watts.
You're paying for the drinks.
Well, there are some known unknowns as far as that building is concerned.
Yes, Minister.
Sorry about that. The legal position is that Tallis's lease expires in March next year. But it is listed, absolutely. Great. It is a listed building now. They have some decisions to make. I think they can continue on there, and I don't want to go into sort of confidential territory here. But you know there's an expectation they're going to do something, and clearly we're very keen that they should stay in the borough. So if there was a circumstance where they decided that it wasn't suitable for them any longer, then the long leaseholder would have responsibility for Mountbatten House, and the long leaseholder is a receiver, and so we have there's some uncertainty in those circumstances. We're not being slow off the mark here. We are talking. We've made approaches to the receiver, and you know, without going into the sort of detailed legal position, there may be other outcomes that will arise if depending on what the receiver decides to do.
Okay with that, thank you. Right, I've got a few which might then promote some more. You talk about long leases, but am I right in thinking that it's a peppercorn rent for John Lewis, and therefore we don't get any income from that at all?
That's correct, Councillor Pearson. And you know, as part of the negotiations we had with John Lewis Partnership and Waitrose, it was a condition on their part that they had that control over the site, and that they were not going to accept a ground rent arrangement. And I think it's part of the sort of modernisation in our thinking now that we are receptive to that way of doing things. They now have the certainty that they've got a 250-year lease on the site, so that it enables them to modernise the store in the future. We haven't got a rent from it, but what we have got is the development proceeds. And so my colleague here to the right was happy to approve of the overall outcome of the negotiations, and I think it was the right way to go in those circumstances. It won't apply in all circumstances, but the prize of attracting John Lewis and Waitrose in that case was the right thing for us to do. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Just a clarification in that the cabinet approved the. just for members' clarification, cabinet approved the.
What, did we rubber stamped it?
Cabinet approved the terms of the disposal.
Thank you, Kevin. You're absolutely right to point that out, that you're not able to make those sort of decisions, and they rest wholly, fairly and squarely in the laps of the portfolio holders, and I'm so pleased of that. Next question. We've had some government funding or not?
I can share. Previously, the council had what was called growth point funding, and that was grant funding for areas that, quite a few years ago, for areas that were identified as, I think at the time, diamonds of growth in terms of the economy. So we had some grant funding, and the council decided, and the council approval was that that grant funding, or elements of that grant funding, were used to fund the public realm works that were talked about. So part of the development agreement was that the council were going to put in the 3.3 million of infrastructure public realm works, and those have been funded from, in effect, the Growth Point grant funding.
And the Growth Point grant funding was 4.5 million, yes?
I believe that's, in total it was, Chair, yes.
I think it's a shame we don't have a service charge, but I think it's the greater good argument again, isn't it, with John Lewis and Waitrose?
Well, we've got provision. Sorry, Chair. We've made provision in the agreement with John Lewis and Waitrose to provide for a service charge. I think we have to. I think there's a trigger, which is to develop 250,000 square feet of office space on the park. But once that happens, then they are obliged to join us, join into a service charge arrangement.
Yeah, that sort of worries me. Sorry. Are they likely to stop 1 square foot before the trigger point? Because that's happened before with housing in this borough.
Really?
Yeah.
That would be a very disappointing outcome, and I think we've got to. I think that they are. My experience would be with John Lewis and Waitrose that they would see the wider benefit in joining in on the service charge, and wouldn't use a device like the fact that we're a square foot short as a means of avoiding that.
Yeah. How many new jobs were generated by Network Rail?
My memory is 950. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's in effect over 1,200 jobs, 1,300 jobs. Good, thank you. Just coming back to the transport issues. Within the planning application, wasn't there a travel plan? We were talking about car parking and the amount of space available. Is that not all tied up with the travel plan? Is that right?
I don't know the answer to that.
Councillor Miller seems to know the answer.
It came before members, the whole planning application. There was a very comprehensive travel plan with that application, which is what you're seeing now being built.
What I suppose I'm concerned about is the issue of how many parking spaces they're going to have and what the accessibility was going to be. So that's in the public domain already. Thank you. Okay, well, that's good. Just slightly, one final thing. This private rented sector stuff, why is that not to include 40% affordable housing?
I don't think that is the necessary expectation that it will. I think we need to make there needs to be as a council we need to ensure that as part of any PRS scheme that there is also provision made for affordable housing. That may not be within the structure itself. That may be somewhere else on Basingview or elsewhere, but it needs to be part of the overall package.
Okay. Well, when will we see that? Because we're going to start adding up these figures and saying, well, there are however 182 units here, so we'll be looking for something like 40 units somewhere else, social housing. Why can't they be in that 182?
It's possible they may be, but it's also a possibility that actually by combining the two uses in one building that would increase the costs significantly. It's something that we are in the midst of at the moment, so I can't really give you a clear answer on that, but there's an understanding on our part that in accordance with our own planning policies, we need to be providing 40% affordable.
Thank you. Has anybody else got any more? Finished. Councillor Keating.
I just want to make a broad comment about car parking in the town. We currently make about £2 million in parking charges, but we are looking at empty shops in the town, increasing numbers of them. We give planning permission to supermarkets to build outside of town and allow them to have free parking. Most of the people around this table are likely to have had experience of internet shopping. Not me, I'm too old. But the impact of internet shopping is that you end up without shops. You end up without shops. So I believe we ought to, as a borough council, be very proactive in protecting the town by reducing what we demand of the people who come into town to use the town centre. And in my view, that should include the parking charges. Because the reality is, if we reduced our parking charges by 50%, just overnight, we lose £1 million, but we probably get £5 million of footfall into the town centre. But the end result, I know it's a balancing act and you have to measure these things, but if we have internet shopping, we have empty units, we charge people to come into town to shop, and we don't charge them to go outside of town to shop, then we're actually failing to grasp the nettle, which is the impact of internet shopping on our town. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Isaac, do you want to?
Yes, I think again you make a good point there, and I think that this is something that is under review. It does contribute significantly to our revenues, but it's getting the balance right, and we do offer free car parking at the top of the town for half an hour. Okay, I know, but that is still a valuable thing as far as many people are concerned, and our parking charges generally are much lower than our competing towns in the region. So, but absolutely, it's we need to do as much as we possibly can to help retailers face these challenges that are impacting across the country. You know, the internet shopping, and so it's an unfinished piece of work. Yeah.
Is that a salute or a question? Okay. Carry on.
Just for information for members of the committee, really, to amplify what Councillor Isaac just said and what Kate mentioned earlier on. We talk about bid in Basingview and in town. If you're interested, come along to my committee on Thursday. Item 2 on the agenda is an update on the bid programme that is currently going on for Basingstoke, and this one's concentrating on the centre of town. And that will give you, the paper is already out, committee papers are published for Thursday, and it will give you an update of how this system works. And from what Kate said earlier on, you'll see the synergy that will bring together future development within the town, and it's business-led. This is not council-led, it's business-led. But it will give you an idea how many other towns are using this in the south of England, all around us, to increase the amount of business that evolves within town centres. And hopefully it can bring about the reopening of a lot of those vacant properties. But it's a well-proven model. And if it's joined up, and I'll use the word again, synergy with Basing View, it's going to reinvigorate, I look forward to seeing it invigorating the whole of the business community within the centre of Basingstoke.
Well made. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Did you want to respond to that? Or not? Well, if there are no more questions, I would like to thank you all for coming. It's been extremely helpful. It's been helpful to me personally, but I'm guessing from the looks of wise nods from around the table that it's been worthwhile. So thank you. You obviously are free to go unless you want to stay for the rest. You're very welcome to listen to the performance panel. You've missed the theatre. Well, you can slip in. It's done, you know. I'm going to take a 5-minute break because we've got some trouble with the broadcast, I'm afraid. Right, can we gather again, please, everyone? Lovely. We've got the very depressing up this end of the table. We've got the webcast working again, so that's cool. Item 6 is the performance panel review, and I'm going to hand over immediately to Sean to take us through it, if that's okay with you, Sean. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. For my sins, I got the short straw again this year, and I continue to be the chair of the performance panel. Some of the things we measure in the performance panel, we the Borough Council can only peripherally influence. For example, broadband coverage. BT open reach programs are not within our control, and I can assure you BT are not likely to give control to anyone else. So we measure them. Government ministers regularly, and other cabinet members even here, pontificate about what we want to do or what we want to achieve. We can honestly not influence them a lot, but the simple process of measuring that which we can may well give us the political clout or the commercial clout to argue with BT that they should be doing more. And that's the mechanism which we achieve the evidence. But we as a Borough Council can't influence it. We can peripherally, make a point. Neighbourhood plans, on the other hand, are things that we can and do influence, and we can create neighbourhood plans. We can support those who are doing them, and whilst it's operationally easy to do, politically difficult to do, because you have to get the communities together to effectively take control of their own neighbourhood plans. And the reality is, to do it from the beginning, when you've not got a neighbourhood partnership or arrangement or whatever, it's difficult to get off the ground. But once they're off the ground, they're easier then to keep the oil on the network and keep it running. We have open spaces managed for diversity, and that's done by our grounds maintenance people, really, and they do a decent job. They've actually come into the 20th century, and they've stopped cutting all the grasses now. They've cut some of them, and they leave areas for the animals and the plants and all the other things that they do. So we're doing a good job. There's no need to worry about it. Litter clearance, this was specifically about along the highways, not on all the streets or right in the middle of town or whatever. And the question was raised, can we do better? And we're actually beginning to liaise now with the operational teams to establish what we're responsible for and what we're doing on behalf of other councils, for example, the county council, and we'll then get a more effective monitoring of those things. Now, we have a very grave problem here because we want to reduce the crime in the borough. But we don't run the police service. We don't control the costs in terms of the county council because they produce a lot of money for neighbourhood people in the crime service. But we do keep an eye on it. And there's no great need to worry about it for Basingstoke at the moment. And so we'll just continue monitoring. And this, of course, is all part of the problem that anyone doing performance monitoring as a whole has. What can you influence? What can you get some evidence to try to influence? What do we actually do? And where are we failing? That's really what the evidence is intended to produce. And I have been as chair of the performance panel, I've been irritable about receiving reports which are obviously factual, but continue to simply say, don't worry, we're continuing to fail. We'll just continue to fail. Because we're measuring it the wrong way, or we're doing it differently, or whatever, but we'll just continue to fail. And at the last meeting, we invited Karen Brimacombe, who's now a much more important figure than she used to be. She's now a superhero in terms of executive controls and all that for the whole of the borough services. And we called her in and we said to her, look, well, I effectively said to her, look, if you're going to produce reports to say we're failing and we're continuing to fail, then I'm not going to find that acceptable. And which is why the one report that was repeatedly saying we were failing was, as we know, on recycling. We've known it for years, and we, as a performance panel, decided that we would have a good look at it, proper analysis, get some figures together. But what we did say was, in April of this year, some of the rules and regulations in relation to recycling were changed. And it would be foolish of us to use the evidence without the impact of that change. So what we decided to do was to begin to look at recycling as a whole, because we're failing on it, but we would wait a few months until the autumn, late autumn, until we get the first figures for the implications of how the changes have impacted. So that's what we're going to do it in that particular way, for that kind of reason. Now, I mean, some of the members of the performance panel are here, and if they want to contribute to anything I'm saying, of course, they're very welcome. The other thing that we have a serious difficulty with is the new homes delivered in a particular year and homelessness. Now, homelessness is a very serious issue, and it impacts adversely on families and children. So we need to start looking at that in the immediate future, in my view. The other thing that, talk about customer complaints, believe it or not, how you calculate a customer complaint is unique. Because we have to define what a complaint is. Now, I never needed to define what a complaint was. I know when somebody complained to me. But we have to define it for the purpose of comparisons. And again, we fail on the basics, the very simple basics. You get a complaint in. All you have to do initially is to respond to that complaint and say, we've got your complaint, and we're going to look into it, and we'll come back to you. Now, that's not rocket science, but we can't do that within 10 days. Now, I find that unacceptable. We've got 500 staff in this council. We've got so many heads of services. I can't remember how many, 7 or 8. If they can't respond to a complaint within 10 days, that's 2 whole weeks to say, look, we've got your complaint. We're not saying is yes, you're right or wrong. We're saying we're going to look at it. And please note that we've got it and we will look at it. Now, if somebody can't do that, I think there's something wrong. I used to run offices. I used to deal with people who run offices up and down the country. And I've never heard of people who couldn't answer, usually in email these days, oh yeah, I got your complaint. It's unacceptable in my view. But apart from that, I didn't want to say anything.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. Any questions for Councillor Keating? Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've all been here before. because Councillor Keating has raised two topics that are sensitive to all of us, and it doesn't seem as if we're getting anywhere. One's the recycling issue. Basingstoke-and-Deane is failing. And I still come back to this old argument, what gets recycled in Basingstoke-and-Deane should stay in Basingstoke-and-Deane, not be hived off by the Hampshire County Council, because it gives a false representation of what is being recycled in this borough. All the reasons that Hampshire County Council might have for claiming that they recycle a certain amount shouldn't matter. It's what this borough is doing and the efforts of its own residents by taking along a lot of recycling material. I bet everyone in this room has done it, down to the Wade Road recycling plant. And just to say what goes into our green trash bins and it gets picked up once every 2 weeks is rubbish. I'm sorry, but you get my meaning. Sorry. That issue has to be resolved, either through the Cabinet going to Hampshire County Council and actually resolving it, or coming to an agreement with Hampshire County Council. Because I think a true representation is what our residents are doing, is applying a conscientious effort to recycle properly. Whether it goes to the incinerator, whether it goes to recycle green into compost and everything else, it shouldn't matter. But our residents are making the effort to recycle, and it should be reflected in the performance figures. I fully support everything that Councillor Keating is doing on this, and I've heard this story time and time again from other members. That's one point. Complaints, I couldn't agree more. With an electronic system, and we've raised this before in scrutiny, and I was under the impression that whomever is responsible for this, you say you've approached Karen Brimacombe, but the appropriate head... I'm sorry? Oh, okay. But if she's responsible for the delivery of the service heads in this council, there must be a service head responsible for each of them all, then that's just a coordinated effort by the officers to pull together a system, and it's, as you say, it's not rocket science, that within their heads, within their sections, if they get a complaint, it's logged. A number should be apportioned to that log, then it can be tracked, then you can get a performance number from it. And, electronic systems can do that these days. So, once again, I'd like to emphasize that those two particular areas can be fixed, given the will. And I'm fully support all the efforts that the performance panel does. I think they do a very good job pulling all this together. But we've got to compare apples and apples. Then we can take some action, tweak the services, so we improve them, because that's the object of this exercise. Thank you.
Just a second, Councillor Keating. I just wanted to respond to that. Is that okay? Oh, very well.
Thank you very much. We wholeheartedly agree in terms of complaints, right? In terms of waste and waste disposal and recycling, this is a national system of monitoring county councils, borough councils, and recycling and matters of that nature. So there is no us doing a deal with Hampshire. You either have to change the national rules or you don't. I'd be all in favour of changing the national rules, but that's not my remit. The reality is the Basingstoke-and-Deane Borough Council collects. Hampshire disposes. All right? We are not allowed to impact on what they dispose of and how. We have the odd say here and there, but Hampshire County Council disposes, we collect. If once we've collected it and we put it into a recycling place, no matter where, it is then not our responsibility and we stop counting. Then we're told we can't change the other rules, which do impact on us. If I take rubbish, I do mean rubbish from my black bin type of stuff, to the Wade Road, I have to put it in different containers, and I do. But they determine. And those recycling figures we don't get fed back to us as a credit. But this is a whole new, not new, it's a whole national system of calculating. And in all honesty, unless we get Eric Pickles back to fix it, and he did try, he did talk about, look, get your weekly bin sorted. We're not going to change the national collecting system and the national recording system. So what I'm saying is we can control what we collect and how effectively we collect it and the price at which we collect it. And that's what we should be doing. We should be doing it best instead of worst. Thank you.
Oh, yes, man.
Less than 10 seconds. On that basis, we collect 100% and recycle 100%, if you think about it, because you cannot say what we don't.
I mean, there are a couple of issues I want to come back to on the Anvil Arts report, but I think it occurs to me that the performance panel identifies reg plat stuff like recycling, customer complaints, housing and homelessness, and I know there's a crossover with last night's meeting on homelessness. And we see these reports, and we see that there may or may not be action taken, and actually Councillor Miller, you said already, you see the reports and there appears to be no action taken. So my suggestion is that for those 4 areas, we task the portfolio holder to come back to either the performance panel or perhaps here and tell us what steps they have taken to get that red down to amber, down to green. And the second thing I'm going to suggest is that the performance panel is basically a formal subcommittee of this, and I think it should be webcast and recorded in the same way as this meeting is. And it isn't at the moment. It just happens in a darkened room somewhere. No, but I think it should be. I think that, you know, just as the discussions we have here, clearly if there's commercially sensitive stuff, and I know there is from time to time when we discuss the Anvil, there was commercially sensitive stuff, which you'd have to turn, apply whatever act it is and turn the cameras off. But those were my 2 suggestions, that we go back, well, I go back from here and task be Councillor Eachus, Councillor Tate, Councillor Reid, to come to the next, we can phase it over the next 2 or 3, depending on the importance. Perhaps I'll talk to the officers about that, and come back and tell us what they have done, what they've put in place, if anything, and if they haven't, why, what progress they're making to go from red back through to green, and when they think they'll achieve it. Because otherwise we're just going to get the same thing, the argument's well rehearsed, and really we're not doing what we should be doing. Are we all happy with that? Hannah? Oh, sorry, Councillor Golding.
Sorry, I believe Performance Panel has already asked Councillor Eachus to come back to our special recycling meeting. It might not make sense to have them both, or at least...
That's helpful, yeah. I mean, it amounts to the same. It amounts to the same thing. That, as long as that gets... Sorry? Small minds never differ, though. It moves us back to getting the report here. Is he going to tell me off now?
Not at all. I do perhaps struggle with some of your previous suggestions, though.
Mine?
Yes. On the basis that if it is your view that Performance Panel is a subcommittee of Scrutiny Committee, which to some extent I agree with in a qualified sense, then, and you believe they should be webcast, that's one thing, but in that case I cannot see if they're having webcast meetings that they should necessarily report back to this committee. My personal view is that frankly the report that we've got is about 107 pages too long, because it goes through everything that the Performance Panel have been given, and I don't believe that's the job of the Scrutiny. I believe that's a job most ably undertaken by Councillor Keating and the rest of the Performance Panel. What I think we've benefited from tonight and I think this is probably where we agree, with Councillor Keating coming back to us with the other member of the performance panel here and telling us what they found, and I agree with you giving us some tasks to work on, whether that's waiting to hear what Councillor Reacher says when she comes back to them, or us looking at the customer complaints and building that into our work programme. But to be frank, I don't quite see the need to webcast the performance panel because it seems to be working well, and we seem to have that transparency by them reporting back to this committee. So that would be my view. I don't know where that leaves us, but it was just my position.
I sort of understand where you're coming from, Councillor Smith. I think the two things. I think that charging the portfolio holder is the right way to make a change. It's their responsibility. So we agree on that, yeah? Okay. Do you want to interrupt me?
Yes.
You want to?
There's a little bit of recent history. I mean, just over a year ago, we got a new council structure and a so-called constitution, and the performance panel was absent from it. And this responsibility the performance panel had was explicitly allocated to the Scrutiny Committee. And Councillor Keating and I came to the first meeting, in fact I think it was a training session with one mind, that this Scrutiny Committee shouldn't be going through all of this in detail, and the performance panel was a good thing. But the advance was the performance panel is a subcommittee of this, because we'd got into the stage where the performance panel nominally reported to something called economic performance and something like that. They never really looked at the thing, and nobody was on both committees. So now it's clear, I mean, this bit of it is, I think, now working. It's clearly a subcommittee of this committee. You can't be on the performance panel unless you're on this committee. And we then had the case that since this committee had to comply with the Constitution, although since nobody else does, I'm not sure why we'll have to do that in the future, the whole report was coming to this committee. But we were tapering off, and Councillor Keating produced a report from each committee telling this committee what it should really think about. And we were going to stop this, and as I understood it, it was your election as Chair of Scrutiny that brought it back as a report and the whole report to this committee. Yeah, I don't mind. Your idea. Sorry? No, it wasn't.
It was my understanding, Councillor Watts, that it was your idea to do it in the first place. I certainly want to get rid of it.
Oh, well, no, it was... It was...
Councillor Keating.
I can confirm that Councillor Keating is irritable, but he and I agreed on this point that we should taper it out, and I think we should taper it out, and you wait for the Chair's performance panel to flag things up.
Yeah,
but
okay.
It should be available to everybody, so everybody can look at it, and I mean, one member of this committee who was with us briefly only ever said one thing, and that was not on the agenda because his SWAT looked at the report. So that was the recent history. Even more recent history is, this was where I got irritable. We had listed scrutiny of recycling in our work programme. And the last meeting of this committee, I think you, Chairman, decided, and nobody else other than me dissented, that we should defer the scrutiny of recycling until we've had another year's data. Now, I think that was a wrong decision, because the thing we need to scrutinise is whether the data we're getting is sensibly based and where the facts are coming from. So I am waiting now for the scrutiny of recycling to come up. Meanwhile, I had to go back to the webcast to see what actually happened and what you actually said, because I couldn't believe it. Yes, you. But the result was that we've deferred until a year's time doing the scrutiny of that. You could bring it back again if you like, because I think we need to look at what are the underlying facts that make this data. And I mean, one former member of this committee and the performance panel is convinced that it's all about Basingstoke. What geographical data she has analysed to come to that conclusion, I don't know. But is there a geographical pattern? Is there any other underlying reason why different areas are different or different products are different. That's, I think, the only place to go, because for years, as Councillor Keating quite rightly said, for years we've been looking at these reds and in different ways hammering the table and saying these reds are bad, but we've never looked under the red to see what's there.
Councillor Watts, I think I have, I bow to your better knowledge of the webcast. It's certainly not my intention that it continues, and it's certainly my intention to see that the areas that are in red are actioned, and if that requires I think it requires the method that I've suggested, that it's scrutinised by seeing what action is being taken by the administration and the officers to get from red right back down to green. And I thought we had agreed that. I think the question that is still that Councillor Smith's raised, we've got to come back to, but Councillor Keating wanted to say something.
I haven't finished what I was saying.
Well, I'm going to ask you to give way, as I gave way to you. I would ask you to give way to Councillor Keating, then you can come back if necessary.
Thank you, Chair. The intention was never for the whole Scrutiny Committee to do the whole job that the performance panel was already doing. It was never intended to do that. The performance panel was expected and intended to do to take the range of information that is currently available, and it is available and produced by officers who are charged with monitoring these things and collecting the data and putting them into comprehensible and edible format. The performance panel did that, and during the first year of the new regime, I identified 2 or 3 items from the performance panel work that would logically and rationally be concerning to yourselves, should be of concern to yourselves. Now, it didn't actually work that well, because I identified what you should be concerned about, and then you said, thank you, Sean, goodbye. Sorry, I don't mean it that way, but the reality was, the intention then was, I would identify as chair of the performance panel, with performance panel members in the room, these are the 3 key issues. You would pick up on them, and the rest of the paperwork of the performance panel was there for your information only, not for use during the meeting, but so that you could pick out why didn't Sean identify this as a problem? Because it seems to me that it is a problem, and because no one person can have the answer to everything, not even me. Thank you.
I take that point, and I mean what's been suggested from my left is that we put this 100 pages or whatever it is on the members' portal, so it's available to everybody. Is that what you're suggesting? And then it doesn't have to come here. But I would counsel that these 2 sheets, the summary sheets, hang on, these 2 summary sheets. Hang on a minute. Have just with the top level come to us, and the points that we're concerned about are K5 and 6, 9, 10, and 14, and we'll push them back to I'll write to each cabinet member. Councillor Watts.
Just on that point, we've already done that with regard to recycling, and the report went to CEP, and as a result of what was decided through CEP, it was then decided we wait a whole year to see how it turns out, and that's what I was irritated about. The other thing I wanted to say is that if you make performance panel a public meeting, then it would change its whole nature, because what we have is a handful of people who have a free and frank exchange of views with the officers concerned, and it will just change the nature if the officers are talking to us in public, and I wouldn't like that. Finally, it's already been suggested this should be put on the members' portal, but the problem there is it's not accessible to the public. If it's going to be considered by this committee, the public, when he's here, should be able to see it. It should be on a website, not Mr.
think,
Members.
yeah, if the two sheets are, that are in Appendix 1 are part of our agenda, they'll be on the website. But we can't have it both ways. Either it's completely public, in which case some of the issues that you've just raised, Councillor Watts, would you think the performance panel might fail, and I understand that. If we don't do that, then this documentation isn't actually available to the public. So we need to decide that. Are we all clear on what I'm saying? So, which do you prefer? The scenario where we just get the summary and that's public and the performance panel remains not for public consumption? Okay, yes, Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, sorry, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I agree with you. I think the summary should be published. I like the idea of the Performance Panel Committee meeting and that not being webcast so that they can have the free and frank discussion with officers and also portfolio holders where necessary to develop or to help portfolio members develop plans to bring back the performance within the realms of acceptability. I have to say that personally I would like the performance panel to have as much power as it really needs and to crack on with doing what they've been doing and just report back to us, but that we reserve the right that if there is something on the performance panel, one of the KPIs that isn't being consistently met, that we reserve the right to then scrutinise that particular subject.
Councillor Mann.
All I wanted to add to that was, Mr. Chairman, that in our last meeting when we were looking at a review of the work programme, we had already identified an item to assign the performance panel with the scoping of a review into recycling. That was something that we had actually discussed and identified as a work stream we wanted to happen.
Can we... we've now got a full house. Councillor Tilbury.
Okay. Yeah, just so I just noticed, when I was on the performance panel, I hadn't picked up on this before, but if you look at page 29 of 121, K5.1, the quarterly recycling rates, if you look at the garden waste collection on there, if you look at the Q4 ones, the last two, obviously show a large drop because we don't actually collect green waste in the winter, so that makes sense. But if you go back to the previous Q4, it's actually one of the highest figures, which is quite some achievement if you don't collect it. So it suggests that graph's a bit suspect to me, but, or there's something a bit odd going on there. So perhaps there was a lot of Christmas trees that year or something, but, you know, I mean, it's just something I noticed in passing while we were meandering around just now. But obviously it does look a bit odd, doesn't it? It's the sort, you know, it does suggest that the Q4 figure from 12-11, I'm not quite sure what the numbers are, you know, they're a bit odd, but that Q4 one does seem, the pattern makes sense on the recent ones, but that one seems out of kilter with the rest there, so that could be addressed before it gets forgotten. But thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you for your topographical references there. Can we make sure that that question's asked of who's that going to be? That'll be Councillor Eaches, yeah. So, back to my other point. Are we in agreement that in future we have the, as Councillor Frost confirmed, the summary, and that they have the freedom to do whatever they need to do in the privacy of wherever they're being private? Okay, thank you. Can I just ask Councillor Keating, in reference to the beginning there, page 9 of 121. Really? I was not a member of this committee, but I was invited to be a member of that particular performance panel. There is an action on the anvil to provide a panel with a list of catchment areas, because I think this isn't over. This is a discussion that has to continue. Can we get that chased, please, Julia? No. All right, I'll go to you. And the other thing is, in those discussions, if you look at number 5 on page 11 of 121, it's an opportunity for me to say something specific about this. Every councillor was invited to a community event at the Anvil a few months ago, and not one of us went. In fact, I was the only one that booked tickets, and then I was ill. And I think it's important that that message goes back to the rest of the council, that, you know, we support Anvil Arts. It's a wonderful, wonderful auditorium. It's the 6th best auditory in the country, and I'm not suggesting you have to spend any money, but if we're invited, it would be a little bit better if maybe half a dozen of us managed to turn up. And I would have gone, but I would like to see others going, and I think it's important because it's the message that sends the management there as well. I'm not criticising anybody. I'm sure they all have good reasons, but just worth bearing in mind if you wouldn't mind. As I say, that's not dead, because I think there's a lot more that needs to be looked at in terms of how the Haymarket's going to run or not run. So is that going to be picked up again at the next meeting, Councillor Keating, or not?
The actions.
Well, any of those.
The actions that are outstanding will be picked up.
And a review about the same time?
We haven't got time to do a review at this point. We're too busy.
No,
And I mean that seriously.
No, I'm not asking you to do it at this point, but this was on the 25th of March, so perhaps you could make a note that it needs reviewing in March 2016?
I think that's a good, valid point, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Tilbury, there you
Just to say, it was picked up again on the 1st of July meeting that it had not been updated on there. There is a reference to it there, but we haven't actually seen it yet. But the other thing is, if you look at page item point 6 on page 11 of 21 about the updates on there, where obviously this was 25th of March and we've not received anything since. And obviously, I mean, that whole sort of meeting came out of a motion I put to the council last year, myself and Councillor Harvey, about the concerns over the finances. And one of the things that came up literally I only found out on the night when we actually had when it first went to the scrutiny meeting, is that in the last year their turnover dropped by £400,000. Now, I think it's explained there that Christine came along and said they had a lot of shows that have been cancelled because they're not a producing theatre. They have to get people in. Well, obviously, it would be useful to find out where they are now, how they've got on this year, because obviously their accounts are sort of probably being finalised at this very moment. So they come out about this time, so we'd have a bit of an idea what happened last year now, whether that's been situation's improved over the last year, but because obviously, you know, a £400,000 drop in turnover in 1 year is, we'd already raised concerns and we weren't even aware of that because it didn't come out in the commissioning process last year, because for some reason their accounts were quite late going to the Charity Commission and we didn't see them until January. So it might be useful if we could get an update on that, even if it's not in great detail, but you know, as soon as that's available, because we did sort of get, one of the things that came out is that they're sending this information to the council, but it doesn't go anywhere. It's not. No one's doing anything with it. They're sending us information because we've asked for it, but no one does anything with it. And I think that was the point. The motion originally was there to address is, you know, we're not going to go through their books every time, but it is just handy to get a bit of a feel for where they're going. But yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tilbury. Yes, I agree. We're going to chase that, and I think we'll also chase where the statistics go. I suspect they get lost in the bowels of commissioning somewhere. So. Okay, thank you. Certainly.
Just thinking about it, wouldn't that belong with CEP to pursue it if it's an ongoing issue? We have a partnership with the Anvil organisation, and that to me strikes me was where it should sit, and that way they can monitor it and at whatever time can be feeding in to the performance panel in this committee.
Okay.
It's something.
No. I'm quite happy to give that to somebody else to do. I will talk. Well, we can talk about it next week at the chairs meeting, can't we? Yes. I think it's a good suggestion. So we'll pass the ongoing, but we still want the review in March. Does that make sense, Councillor Tilbury? You all right with that? Good. That item's finished now. Okay, work programme. I can't. I know where it is. It's all right. Right, it's at the back of the agenda, on page 121 of 121. We've set up a little task and finish group, which is probably going to meet on the 30th of July, next week. But it may not, because you may not have seen my email. Clearly hasn't. Yeah. Well, I might not need to reschedule it, but we'll see. So, so that's ongoing. On the, if we go to the September COG1 soft market testing, Lisa Kirkman sort of volunteered to come and answer some questions, but you know, in the spirit of the way we've been tonight, that really ought to be the portfolio holder answering the questions. So I'm not quite sure who that sits with. Councillor Tate. So we'll approach Councillor Tate and ask him to accompany, or for Lisa to accompany him. I think it's really an update because, apart from anything else, I think there are a lot of people in this building who are interested because it involves our own staff. And for those of you on that sort of issue of COG1 and the arts, we're now being rated as in the top 10 of sort of second-tier festivals. So we're not Edinburgh or Glyndebourne or anything like that, but there's the next tier down. It's like theatres, there are different levels of them. This is the next tier down. And Basingstoke apparently is in the top 10 of that, which is seriously impressive, I think. So the provision of GP surgeries is the task and finish group, and then the further review of the work programme. Something came out in the last couple of days, and I can't remember who sent it out. Tim.
Educational attainment?
It was. Educational attainment, Tim Boschke. Have you all seen that? Yep. You all seen it? Well, basically, it's a report that talks about GCSE performance at 2014 and the comparison county and national, and we're sort of pretty much in line with those, but the gap in attainment in attainment terms, which is not the same, is very wide in Basingstoke. And I know it's Hampshire County Council that deal with education, but there are residents and there are schools. I think it's worth us having a look at that and asking Tim to scope out and see if we can dig a little bit deeper. I think we possibly know some of the answers. Go on.
Jean Thorpe, we could probably get her to come in and speak to the committee.
Good. Yeah, Jean Thorpe's very good. She or Andy Hayes, certainly.
She's been in before. She used to come into... Yeah, she used to come to community...
Excuse us.
Wellbeing.
That's quite helpful. Jean Thorpe, who I know as well, would probably be prepared to come. She's the area manager, and she could help us with that. I mean, I don't want to get bogged down in Ray's online statistics and so on, but well, because they are what they are. But you have to because Ofsted look at Ray's online. So, but I am concerned that levels of pupil premium, certainly in the primary area, is very, very high in some areas, and that's effectively, well, there's a correlation between children on free school meals and attainment, and so if that gap's widening, which I think we all knew really, I think it would be responsible of us to ask the questions, to find out what they think, and then see what action we can take. Are we happy with that? That was a half a nod, Paul.
Yes, half a nod.
Okay, that's fine.
It's a very deep subject.
I accept that.
Very sensitive subject as well.
I accept that too, but since we've been circulated, and we are the local authority, and it might be devolved. Well, we live in hope. Anyway, let's have a go.
But
Councillor Watts, yes.
Just a regular refrain from me and possibly Graham as well. The areas of the local education authority don't map onto our boundaries, so therefore Testbourne, which I think comes second in this district on those criteria, and I question those criteria, is actually, I think, regarded by the education authority as a part of Winchester. I just want to make sure that we do get all the data when we need it. And
I accept that, and not you're quite right, and there's a significant number of children that go from Oakley to Testbourne, so you know that's a point that we can make to Jean on getting her to come along. Are there any other items that people want to scope out or add to this?
It's not to add, Chair, just to I'm not taking anything away either. Just to clarify, if I may, in the meeting in January, on the 12th of January, we have marked down recognition and resolution of complaints. Given what we've discussed and what Performance Panel have put forward, would it seem sensible for us to see what the portfolio holder we've tasked to deal with that has to say for how they're improving it, and whether that would be an appropriate time for them to come back and talk to us about it?
Yeah, I agree with that. Councillor Watts.
I've been actioned since I suggested the subject to fill one of these forms in explaining the subject. And I haven't done that because I thought January is a long while away. But
You can put your hand down, Councillor Watts.
I've just got this. I just suggest perhaps you wait until you see what I write, since only I think Councillor Bound understood me when I suggested it, before deciding you don't want it there.
I don't think we've decided we don't want it, the reverse.
Well, I don't see how it could be dealt with by one portfolio holder.
Okay. Well, you do the form as soon as you can, Councillor Watts, and then we will take it forward. But it may not be just one portfolio holder. I do understand that. But the principle is we're asking portfolio holders to come to account, not officers. Everybody happy? Thank you. Meeting over, 9:25. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your patience with me.